Hello, everybody, and welcome into Last Call. I'm Nathaniel Finch with my co-host. We'll get to them here in a second, but we've got a loaded show for you. Plenty to talk about. Obviously, UIndy. That's going to take up half the show. A great weekend in UIndy sports, not just on the basketball side of things, but all throughout campus. You know, on Saturday alone, the teams went 9-0. It was an incredible weekend for UIndy. One of our teams competed in the national championship over the weekend. So we'll get to that. We also have plenty of college sports. Purdue, IU, Butler, all in action over the weekend. Big games for them. We'll talk about that. The Daytona 500 and the start of NASCAR. We'll talk about that. And the NBA All-Star Game. We've got so much to talk about. Let's get right into it. Nathaniel Finch again. Caden Colford now with Giselle Valentine. Let's start with UIndy's women's basketball team. A pretty good weekend for them. And, you know, Giselle, you were there at the game as well. It was a fun game for them senior night.
It was definitely such a fun day. As you mentioned, it was senior day at Nickerson Hall. 3 seniors graduating: Sadie Hill, my fellow region rep Maya Scheidt, and Marissa Knobloch, who unfortunately has missed this season due to injury. But what an impressive game. UIndy wins 76, Southwest Baptist 65. As I mentioned, it's a revenge matchup. Southwest Baptist, they did defeat the Greyhounds last season to knock them out of the GLVC tournament. This is the first time they have met this season, and UIndy now gets the last laugh in this win, Nathaniel.
Yeah, it was a pretty good performance from a few of the players in front of a home crowd. You know, it was, again, the last time we're going to see a lot of those seniors. Tell me about the seniors and how they played.
It is so crazy. Let's start with Sadie Hill. Career high 32 points in her final home game as a Greyhound in the regular season. 32 points, 8 rebounds, 1 assist, a steal, and 2 blocks in 37 minutes.
It's incredible.
It's incredible. It was just so amazing to see just her get her career high. I mean, that is how you leave your mark at UIndy. One of the greatest Greyhound players, in my opinion, to play for the women's team.
It's almost reminiscent of that Kobe game, right?
Yes.
Your last game, you got to make it bang, your final one, and then she goes out and puts up a huge stat line. It was really impressive.
Yeah, talk about a grand finale, right? 32 in her last game, or last regular season game at Nickerson Hall, I should say. So, I mean, she's been doing this all season. Nothing new from her.
Exactly. It's not really a shocker at this point. I mean, she's played 58 career games with UIndy, 51 starts. I mean, she's a transfer from Murray State University and already coming in off the bat, just proving how good of a player she is for this Greyhound program.
And you know what, Giselle? She's not done either. She's not done because it may be the last time they'll play in front of a home crowd, but a couple games this weekend in the GLVC tournament. You know, you win that, you're in the national tournament. So it's not over for Sadie Hill.
It's not over for her. And speaking of other seniors, I'm going to talk about Maya Scheidt. So my fellow region rat, the Crown Point, Indiana native, played 93 games for UIndy, which is insane. Over a 5-year time span. The graduate guard finished her final regular season home game with 4.3 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 block, and steal in 26 minutes. So not as offensive as Sadie Hill, but once again, Maya Scheidt, such a huge defensive player, especially reliable off the bench. I mean, she started with Sadie Hill in their final regular season game, but in these late game situations, she really proved how good defensive she is. She got a lot of steals in the mix. She really had some big time plays, and just her defensive effort overall. I can go on and on about my fellow region rat, but that is also just a great performance by her as well. And it's nothing really, like you said, it's something that we're not, this isn't a shocker to us.
How do we feel for the rest of the season? Obviously, I talked about you got those 2 regular season games, a couple road trips in St. Louis, then out in Rolla. The rest of the season and then into the GLVC tournament, what's the feeling of this team? What do you think they can do?
I think so. When Mark Mitchell's post-game interview with our very own sideline reporter, Elijah Sutton, he says he's just working on one game at a time. So I really think that this game, they really definitely needed this win. They came off a loss against Drury, one of the top teams in the nation. They get back in the win column here on Saturday. So I think that's going to carry on for this road trip as they go to St. Louis, Missouri, to play UMSL and Missouri S&T. So that's going to be a pretty big matchup. But I think in the back of their mind, they want to go far in this GLVC tournament. They're going to give it all what they got. So it's going to be pretty impressive for them. And I think, too, they're just going to give it their all, honestly. I know Mark Mitchell, if he's not happy with what he sees, he's going to quickly fix it right away. But I think that they really needed this win, and that's going to be their final push.
Pretty excited to see what the rest of the season can bring. Giselle, thanks for your input. We will talk to you here in actually just a few minutes for the NBA coverage, the All-Star Game. So We'll say goodbye to you now, but not for long. We'll talk to you in a bit. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys.
Let's go ahead and switch gears. Let's talk about the men's team, this UIndy men's basketball squad that, they just continue to roll. Let's get right into it. They get a big win, against a fellow top 10 in the region squad in Southwest Baptist. They eke out a close one. It's a big one, though, because now, the 86-79 victory puts them right there in terms of trying to host a regional. It was a big win.
Man, this team's so fun. I say that every time we get on here. This team is so fun. I mean, you can watch the highlights. This team, they love to get on the break. So many highlight plays. It's Showtime basketball from the tip. I had the honor of calling their game on Thursday. And, Julian Steinfeld hammered one down. Jesse Bingham was flying everywhere. And how about Kendrick Choa? Kendrick Choa, he notched his 600th rebound in that game. And he's been on a tear, GLBC Player of the Week.
His second time this season that he has earned that honor. He had a career-high 27 points, 14 rebounds on Thursday against Drury. And then the Southwest Baptist squad, it was a close game all throughout until the end. You go into the final minute, and the Hounds are only up by 3 points. So while it may have been a 7-point win, it definitely was not, one of those blowout type of wins. It was a close one to the end. UIndy just did a good job hitting the free throws, though. But how many times did we hear that whistle being blown? There were over 50 fouls called in this game between the two teams. 31 against Southwest Baptist. The Greyhounds took 41 free throws. For one, you got to hit more free throws than they did. They really struggled from the line. They left 14 points stranded at the free throw line. But, it was just one of those games where every 30 seconds we, heard the whistle go off. And it was another instance where, the referees, they didn't decide the game. But it definitely made it a lot harder for Southwest Baptist to stay in that game when UIndy was constantly getting to the free throw line and, for fouls that had no business being called.
Another thing about this Greyhound team is that might have not been the prettiest win they've had all season, but they just find a way to get it done. No matter the case. They'll blow a team out by 30. They'll come back and win by 3. They just hit the big shots when they need to. And that's the guys from 1 to 10. The guys 1 to 5 on the bench. You have on the court, and then you have 5 guys on the bench already step in. Hit the big shot.
It's been a pretty impressive season, to say the least, for this UIndy squad. And, of course, we interviewed head coach Paul Corsaro on one of our other shows. That was last week's Good Morning Greyhounds. I had a chance to sit down with him for a half hour. So if you want to hear me pick Coach Corsaro's brain for a half hour, go check that out. But, this is a squad that's won 18 straight now, tied for the longest streak in program history in a single season. And they're not done yet. They've got their 2 regular season games to finish out at Umsel, which is going to be a huge game on the road, and then against Missouri St. Louis, one of the top scoring teams, if not the top scoring team in the conference as well. So it's not an easy road to finish out the year, but you got to imagine if they can get a couple of those wins and maybe win 1 or 2, if not 3, in that GLBC tournament game, they're going to be locking up a NCAA Midwest region hosting job. I think they're guaranteed to make the playoffs regardless.
Yeah.
They could very well host if they keep winning this.
You said it best. They have high goals, right? I had the honor to talk to Kendrick Choa after his game against Drury when he scored his career high 27. And he was just taking it one game at a time, day in and day out, talking about he got better free throw shooting this year. And this team just gets so many strides better each time they play, day in, day out kind of thing. It's been like that all season. Like you said, high goals. They have their eyes set, at a championship.
Can't wait to see what this season brings. Well, that'll wrap up our basketball coverage, but that's not it for our UIndy sports coverage. On Saturday, UIndy teams, like I said earlier, went 9-0 across the nation on the road at home. And we've got to highlight that. Come on. The best part of having an indoor athletics arena at UIndy is a lot of our outdoor sports can enjoy indoor seasons. The UIndy tennis team, they hosted the ITA Indoor Tennis Association D2 National Championships. That was over the weekend. Going into the event, they were ranked 7th. UIndy found their way to the national championship match, but fell on Sunday 4-1 to the 3rd-ranked St. Leo squad. So close to victory. But the season isn't over for the Greyhounds tennis team. That's just the indoor season. They've got a great spring season ahead of them. And if you could be national runner-ups in your indoor season, that's got to make you feel pretty confident for what the spring can hold.
For sure. Take a look at the softball team. Yesterday, they were in Nashville, Tennessee for the Music City Invitational, coming out of the day 1-1. Their first contest was an absolute masterclass from All-American Kenzie Smith, dealing her 3rd career no-hitter against Parkside on the 1-year anniversary of her last no-no in last year's Music City Invitational. Not to mention, Smith had 7 Ks in her crazy performance. However, their second game didn't have the same great outcome as they lost a very close game to a talented Harding team, the final score being 5-4 in that one after Harding pulled ahead in the final inning.
It is finally starting to warm up outside. You know what that brings? That brings baseball season. The UIndy's baseball team hosted 3 games in their opening weekend, getting the series sweep at home against Notre Dame College from Ohio. Not the Notre Dame up north of South Bend, but Notre Dame College, a series sweep. Not only 3 wins to start the season, but they did it in a very convincing and record-breaking fashion. They broke the record for the most runs in a single game in program history with their 32-7 victory in the second game on Saturday. 32-7? You kidding me? 17-1 and 13-1 were their other 2 scores. Will end up being a very lopsided, very dominating weekend. Hopefully a sign of what's to come for this baseball squad.
In men's lax action, the 7th-ranked Hounds pulled one out against the 11th-ranked Seton Hill in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. It was Nick Rangard who scored with just 16 seconds left to play to lift UIndy over the Griffins, making the final score 17-16. Tristan Schaefer led the Hounds in scoring with 5, and in the net, Jonathan Kelly had 6 saves on the day with the win. The Hounds improved their record to 3-0, starting the season off hot.
Plenty of UIndy sports over the weekend. How about the UIndy women's lacrosse team with a hot start to the season? They're currently ranked 7th in the nation, enjoying a 3-0 start to the year. This weekend marked their home opener, a 15-9 win over Walsh, and on Sunday a 22-2 win over Findlay. I'll tell you what, Caden, their best player belongs to our communication department as Quinn Malcolm, enjoying an incredible start to the year. We got to give her a shout out. One of our fellow commies leading the squad in every major category out there. Also, how about a special shout out to the UIndy wrestling team? Didn't compete this weekend, but we failed to mention their GLVC championship victory last weekend. Program's first. Very impressive for the 8th-ranked team in the nation. Incredibly, though, the wrestling team wasn't the only team at UIndy to win the GLVC championship last weekend. We've got our very own UIndy TV's Leticia Vaselli, a swimmer on the squad. And Leticia, again, you guys, wrestling wasn't the only team to win the championship. You guys, men and women's team, great weekend down in Evansville.
Yeah, we did. Actually, the women's won their first GLVC since we were back in the conference. And so it was more than, 5 years since we've been back in this conference, and it's constantly been the men's team winning over and over again. And we were always so close, like 1 point away, 2 points away. And so for this year, for the women's to win the GLVC, that was a huge deal.
Yeah, and that's got to be just a little bit more. Obviously, you want to go out there and compete and swim your best, but it's got to be a little bit sweeter to get that first one, right? And maybe it's going to open up the floodgates and you guys can continue winning, but that just had to be a little bit sweeter, right? The celebration had to be a little bit better.
Yeah, it was. And our team obviously has been through a lot of things. Like our head coach left the team last year, and we had multiple coaches coming and leaving. We had some really good athletes that ended up graduating, and so we were at a spot where we were kind of like, we still have some really good swimmers, but a lot of our swimmers are brand new. A lot of our swimmers weren't tapered, weren't rested for this meet. And so for us to be able to take that victory just because the girls worked so well together as a team, that felt really, really sweet.
Tell me about yourself specifically. How do you compete down there in Evansville?
So I'm a swimmer and I compete the 50, 100, and the 2 freestyle. Freshman year came in with a bang, and I had like the school record for the 50 free, and I won everything.
All right.
Yeah, and then ever since then I kind of stalled a little bit, and I just wasn't evolving as much. This year I was able to be in my best shape I could be. I got 2nd place in the 50 freestyle. In the 100 freestyle, I could have gotten 3rd place with my time. We won 4 different relays, 1st place. So
Goodness.
All of that was really good. We didn't have any school records just yet, but wait a couple of weeks and we'll get some school records in the board.
Tell me about that couple of weeks. Tell me what's coming up here right down the pike. Obviously, the last couple of years you guys got to the national championship. We're right there. Tell me about what we got coming up here.
So last year we were runner-ups to the national championship, and hopefully this year with the elimination of Queens, University of Queens, we are looking for that 1st place spot in nationals. It is 2 weeks from now at IUPY, the NCAA tournament for all Division II schools in swimming. And I think it's going to be really, really big, and I think we can do something really great.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. So you got to be pretty excited for your individuals too, and that medley relay you guys do, that
yeah,
freestyle relay.
Yeah, we won last year the 4 freestyle relay and the 200 freestyle relay. Hopefully we'll get to win those again, and hopefully win the other ones, and then maybe I can get another one of these.
Tell you what, get one of those. We'll talk to you again here in a couple weeks after that, after the national championship. Best of luck to you and the team, and we hope for the best. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
When we return, we've got plenty more for you. How about some college ball? That's next, right here on Last Call.
Award-winning news coverage. Brought to you by ethical journalists that care about you. We have you covered on crime, latest on sports, and the best in entertainment. This is UIndy TV News.
That's what we're going to talk about right now. It's going to be Purdue getting a big win, much needed win. IU squeaking a close one out. They needed it. And then Butler. Oh, Butler. Let's start with Purdue. Let's get right into it for the Boilermakers. And, you know, after that 2-game skid, we needed to see a victory, and they got one here at home in front of this home crowd. Pretty impressive one over Ohio State, 82-55.
Yeah, Zach Edey was doing his thing right. I mean, he went out there 26-11. Pretty solid game for him. National Player of the Year, I still think. But I don't know if I'm as high on this Purdue team as I was beginning of the year. You know, they've seen the court stormed 2 or 3 times in the past month. So as a Purdue fan, does that kind of scare you a bit?
Definitely scares me, but getting this win against Ohio State pretty convincingly makes me feel, you know, a lot better for the Boilermakers. It definitely, you know, every team hits their slump. You know, no team's going to go in and finish the season perfectly. It hasn't been done in, you know, decades for a reason, but I think that if Purdue, and Mason Gillis talked about it after the game, he started, had a pretty good game, said that, you know, he doesn't think that we're quite out of this, right? They're not quite the team that they were. They're not ready to go, but it's definitely, you know, you make plenty of steps when you get a big win over Ohio State. And of course, you know, 8 straight losses for Holtman's squad. It's not like this was a great team that they played, but it's good to get that monkey off your back to know, hey, we can mark a W in the win column. It's possible. We can do it. Let's figure out how to do it more consistently here. And obviously there's a big one coming up here in a week.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the box score, there's only one other guy in double figures. And while this Purdue team's good, they're very, very talented. I just don't think it's sustainable come tournament time. So, I mean, we'll look to Matt Painter to figure that situation out.
It can be misleading, though, when you look at it that way because, yeah, Trey Coppin-Red had 11 points, great game off the bench. You know, a lot of those came more towards the end of the game. But it's not because Edey was the only standout player. It's because Brandon Newman had, you know, a few triples. Braden Smith had a good game. They had a lot of guys that came in. Fletcher Lawyer made some good shots. You know, David Jenkins kicked some butt. So it's not just that you had Edey and nobody else. It was Edey and everybody else. And, I mean, Edey's going to dominate every scoreboard that you put him in. But when you get those extra guys who are coming in and collectively coming up to help him, that's what's big. So it's not that it was only Edey. It was that it was everybody. And, you know, when you've got so many guys out at guard that can score, it's, you know, you're not going to have one guy dominating that.
One question I do have. Who is Purdue's bucket getter? Who do they go to with 10 seconds left on the clock to get them a basket when Zach Edey has 3 guys on him?
Oh, you get to Zach Edey. It doesn't matter how many people you have him. You get him in there, and theoretically he should be physical, go to the bucket. Now, there have been times, especially late in the last few games where they've lost, where he's been a little bit more afraid to, where he just passes it out, makes a poor play. But it's got to be Edey. You know, it doesn't matter how many guys you put on him. You got to get it to him. There's plenty of guys that, I mean, these are freshmen, so you're asking a lot for them when you're putting all that pressure of the game-winning shot on their shoulders. But, I mean, Fletcher Lawyer's capable. Brandon Newman's capable. Braden Smith's capable. We just got to get the ball to the guys that are open. But, I mean, come on. When you get the National Player of the Year, get the ball to him at the end of games.
Definitely National Player of the Year, for sure.
You know who's also in that conversation for the Wooden Award? My man from IU. Let's talk about the Hoosiers. They got a big win. It was a close one. It was on Saturday, 71-68 in Bloomington. Did not look pretty, right? Illinois had a good lead on them for a good chunk of that game, and, you know, everyone's thinking, oh, no, Bloomington was the one place where IU doesn't lose. And, you know, it definitely didn't look too good for a good stretch of it. But then all of a sudden, pretty impressive. IU was able to pull it out at the end.
No, they did. A pretty complete effort, too. I mean, 4 players in double figures. Trace, of course, did his thing. Jalen Hutchafino, him and Trace. I love the connection that they're building. I really do.
Wild. And Trace Jackson Davis is a walking 25-point, 10-rebound game. It doesn't matter. Like, that's what you start him with. And then you say, all right, let's see how much better he gets. A walking 25, 10-point performance every single game. It's phenomenal. This guy's a stud.
And I think it was that Purdue game at Assembly that really ignited him. I mean, since then, he's been on a tear along with this entire IU team. They've been pretty hot.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun to watch too. Even from a Purdue's fan perspective, this is a good basketball team. And when it comes down to it, this is going to be one heck of a Big Ten tournament. In previous years, you've got 7, 8 teams that are all vying for the top. Maybe not as many teams at the top of the Big Ten. Some teams are faltering, but you're telling me that Purdue and IU being the top 2 teams, obviously Northwestern's up there as well, but this is going to shape up to be a great finish for this season of the Big Ten.
I think so too. A lot of energy around both of these teams. Fan bases are really starting to get into it.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 teams that are very, very solid in all aspects of the game, but they play 2 very different brands of basketball. You have Purdue that likes to slow it down, drive it to the paint, get it to their 7'4" monster and Zach Edey. And we see IU, who plays kind of like UIndy. They love to get out on the break. They love to play showtime basketball, fast break basketball. So it'll be pretty cool to see how those 2 play styles clash.
Yeah, can't wait to see. Obviously, IU, they will play at Michigan State this week, and then both teams, collision course, Mackey Arena, Purdue versus IU on Saturday. We're going to have coverage of that game coming up on our next show next Monday. But, man, this is setting up to be a great one in Mackey.
I think so as well, man. I mean, like I said, so much energy around these teams. It's been so long since these 2 teams have been so highly regarded in the NCAA.
Yeah, and as far as Butler, a loss. They should have beat Georgetown. Georgetown came in 1-15 in the Big East. It's a game you can't lose. 68-62, the final score there. The Bulldogs had a layup. They had the easy one. They had the gimme. You just mark it off and go on. At home, couldn't get done.
And this was a Georgetown team that had lost 6 straight coming into the game against Butler. And Butler, I mean, they had some okay performances. Jaden Taylor had 21 on the day. Jaden Taylor went to Perry Meridian. I watched him a lot during his high school career. Dropped 43 against Southport with an overtime, or a 3 to send him to overtime. Very, very talented player.
Caden, all I hear from you talking about these college guys is how much they beat up on Southport. You guys ever get any wins down there? What's going on with that?
You know what? In basketball, hey, we're pretty tough. Look for us in the sectional. We played Ben Davis very, very, very tough this year, but we drew them first round for sectional. Of course, Ben Davis ranked in the country. Not someone you want to see first round of sectionals, but hey, Southport can make some noise.
We'll check in on Southport next week. That is it for our Butler talk. I don't know how in depth you want to go about the dumpster fire up there at Hinkle, but when we come back, Giselle's going to come back. We've got a pretty good weekend up in Salt Lake City for some Pacers at the All-Star Weekend. We'll talk about that coming up right here on Last Call. Welcome back to Last Call. Nathaniel, Finch, Caden, Colford, Giselle. We loved your conversation about UIndy women's basketball. Let's carry that on and talk about the NBA. Giselle Valentin, our NBA correspondent. We had, an interesting weekend up in Salt Lake City. Some Pacers played pretty well. Started with the Rising Stars game. Benedict Mathurin, Andrew Nembhard looked pretty good. Getting to the three-point contest, looking really good was a pair of Pacers. And Halliburton had himself not a bad little all-star game. What did you think of the weekend?
I thought it was a great weekend for Pacers fans overall. Let's start with the three-point contest. So it was between Buddy Hield, who previously won back in 2020 with the Sacramento Kings, and Tyrese Halliburton. They qualified in the final round against Damian Lillard, D-Dalla. And in the first round, I was really surprised to see Tyrese Halliburton had 31 points to kill it in the first round, but he finished off the second in 17. But Buddy Hield had 23 points in the first round, but 25 just wasn't enough to compete with Damian Lillard, as he finished it off with 26, the first Portland Trail Blazers guard to win the three-point contest.
I mean, Lillard's too good. And what's kind of surprising is that it's his first one.
Exactly.
He has never won before. You would think that him and Curry would just trade back and forth the entirety of the last few. You see Lillard right here in the actual All-Star game hit a great shot towards the end. I mean, he kicked some butt throughout the entire weekend.
Oh, he definitely did. But if I'm gonna be completely honest, Caden and Nathaniel, I really thought this year was kind of a snore fest. If I'm gonna be honest,
I agree. I'm right there with
it was
you.
kind of lackluster. I was expecting some little sazon, some little sofrito, everything, but it wasn't doing it for me. I don't know if it was Salt Lake City. I don't know. I don't know if it was salty or something. I don't know.
You got to just blame the nature of the game, right? So the Pro Bowl in the NFL is never going to be as good as an actual NFL game. the All-Star game, it's never going to be as good as some actual NBA game. Now, granted, there's a few games that kind of turn out like this, but these are guys who are just coming out and screwing around and having fun, putting on a show. I agree with you. It's not as competitive as what you would want. Basically, coming out of halftime, you look at the top scorers. Jason Tatum says, hey, let me take over. He goes out and has 55 points. Everyone's like, oh, 55 points in an NBA game. I mean, it's not quite what it looks like. So I think I agree with you there. It's not quite, the luster of an NBA game, but it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be guys coming out here having fun, messing around on the court, putting on a show, putting up some fun numbers, and winning some money for charity. They did plenty of that.
Yes, they definitely did. I think we just grew up. I think when we were younger, just the All-Star game, we got super excited. Yeah. It's like, oh my goodness, the dunk contest. It had all these people who we know. Then you go on this year, it's like, I don't know who this man is at all. But it was still just, I do love the All-Star weekend. It's such a fun weekend, one of my favorites to look forward to the entire season. But I'm really excited about next year as it's going to come to Indianapolis. So I think it's going to have that Hoosier history native right there.
Can't wait to see it. Can't wait to see what the Pacers can do for the rest of the season. When we come back, hey, NASCAR, they open their season at Daytona. We're going to bring on Landon Coons to talk about that. That and more on Last Call.
Hey, it's Giselle here on 88.7 WICR.
88.7 The Diamond, the only jazz and classical station in Indianapolis, completely led by the students of the University of Indianapolis. Listen to us on iHeartRadio, TuneIn app, FM radio, HD radios, or even on our website at wicronline.org, a different kind of public radio.
Welcome back to Last Call. We've got our final segment of the day. Time to talk about some racing. Don't do this as much on the show, but we're going to do it a lot more often now that the NASCAR season has started. In the Cup Series, the Daytona 500 was upon us yesterday. Not a bad little race either. The longest Daytona in history. I'm Nathaniel Finch, Caden Colford, and our racing guy, Landon Coons. Landon, not a bad little weekend for racing, huh?
No, I thought it was a good start to the weekend. I think it's a good 2023 start for NASCAR. The Truck and Xfinity race, they're pretty solid races. Friday and Saturday night. Sunday night, that was when the whole stars came out. It was a perfect start to 2023. I don't think you could have asked for a better way to start this season.
As far as the Cup Series race yesterday, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. getting the win in overtime. What do you think of the first use of these new overtime rules?
So me personally, I'm not super crazy about the overtime rules. I think it's cool that they have them. I think if you're going to have an overtime rule, I think this is the best way that you can do it. Just me personally, I'm not crazy about an overtime kind of thing because your race is the Daytona 500. It's not the Daytona 530, It should end right at 200 laps, 500 miles. There's no reason to tack on more. Formula One and IndyCar doesn't do it, so there's not a reason in the world why NASCAR shouldn't do it. But all in all, I think it's a relatively good impression.
Did you feel like Stenhouse Jr. won fair and square? Like, what did the overtime rules, did that help make it feel like it was a fair race at the end?
I do think it was because the rule is as soon as the caution comes out on the last lap, whoever's ahead is deemed the winner as soon as that caution flag flies. And it clearly states that Ricky is clearly out in front of Joey Logano. So, yeah, I think it's fair for Ricky, and I can be more happy for him and that team, small car team, one car team with NBA player Brad Doherty on that team as well.
So if you think it's fair, you think he won, maybe it is a good idea to keep the overtime rules in because, if everyone's happy with the finish, obviously it's they don't end in 500 laps exactly, but, he won the race. Obviously you see here the final lap crash, but, you got to feel pretty good if Stenhouse won. Maybe you keep the rules around.
I would, but, I think you say that as like if you're a fan, if you're for Ricky Stenhouse Jr., but for example, say if someone was going for Joey Logano, they wouldn't want that either, or they could want that if they were a fan of that.
Not a bad start to the NASCAR season, right? How about the rest of the racing circuit coming up soon? We've got IndyCar coming up. Connor Daly actually raced in that 500 qualified. Didn't do too hot, but you don't expect too much from an IndyCar guy. But Landon, we're going to have you on plenty this season talking about IndyCar, F1, NASCAR, the whole shebang.
Looking forward to it.
We appreciate Landon's insight, Giselle Valentine earlier. This is Caden Colford. I'm Nathaniel Finch. Tune in next Monday. Plenty more to talk about on Last Call.